Hey guys, it's Casey and welcome back for part 10 of our tower defense tutorial. So what we're going to do is we're going to start setting up some random functionalities inside the game. I think this is a very good basis for a tower defense, and I think it looks pretty good to me. We have our waves set up, we have a system for towers so that we can add towers whenever we want. We're dealing damage, we're killing them. For me, a lot of the base functionality is in, so now it's just we're going to start adding random things to the game. So I think what we'll add in this video is we will add currency. We'll make it so that the player will have money. We will keep track of the player's money, and with his money, he can build towers. When we kill enemies, we'll get money. At the end of waves, we can give ourselves money. So let's go ahead and set that up. So what I want to do is, since we have money, let's just tie the money to our player. So inside of our player's pawn, which is going to be our player camera pawn, inside of it, we're just going to keep track of the player's money. So we'll make a variable. We will call it, we'll just call it money, and we will make it a integer. So let's keep it in solid amounts of money. And then what we can do is we can make a widget, and let's make a widget that keeps track of our player's money. If you wanted to, you don't have to separate a lot of these widgets. Like, for example, like spawn next wave widget. If we wanted to, depending on how you structured your final UI, if you had like a UI across the top of your screen and you had like money and you had lives and you had all this stuff, you would probably want to put a lot of it in the same widget, and then what you could do is you could hide and unhide this button. We're not going to do that. I don't think there's really a purpose of showing you that, because I think it's fairly simple and straightforward, and it's just not worth putting that in a tutorial, in my opinion. So what we're going to do is we're just going to make a new widget, and we will call this because we're going to put our lives and we're going to put our currency inside of this widget. What could be a good name? We'll just call this the overlay widget, I guess we'll call it. And we're just going to put this is just going to be our overlap widget. This is our overlay. Let's call it overlay widget. And I'm just going to put this is going to be a widget that's going to be across our player screen, basically 24/7 at the top of the screen. And inside of it, I know I want to put two things in here. We're going to put, for now, we're going to put our money and we're going to put our lives. So I'm going to create a horizontal box so that they will be horizontal from each other. I'll drag it out a bit, and inside of it, we are going to put a few text boxes. The first text box, we will have money, colon, and we can have like $10, sure. Let's center that, center it down, there we go. And then to the right of that, we can copy paste it over, and on this one, we will say lives, and we can say like 10. We're gonna override these values later. I'm gonna set both of them to be fill, so that they get their own space. That looks good to me. Maybe we should increase the font just slightly. Let's set that to be 30, and let's set this to be 30, just to make it a little bigger. How is that going to appear? So on our screen it's going to be white. Let's just change the color to something like red or something, just because I want this to pop on the screen so we can really see it. For you, once again, these are design decisions, where you want it, how big is it, how does it look inside of some type of overlay, the text, all that. That's up to you. For us, this is good for now. Let's do what we've always done, and let's wrap our canvas panel in a size box, and let's wrap the size box in a scale box, and let's change the size to make it 1920 by 1080. That looks good to me. I'm going to center that just so it's just a little bit better. Alright, so now let's promote these two variables. Let's make our first text block be our money text, and we will make our lives be our lives text. That looks good. And what we can do is we can actually make bindings of this. What a binding is, if you see here, we have text and we have a bind, and we can create a binding. What this will do is this will make it so that our text will constantly be updated to whatever we want it to be. So like, let's take money for example, and if we created a binding with money, you can see we get this new function, and it's called get money text. I'm just going to rename it. We're going to call it money binding. And now what this is going to do is this return node, this text value here, is literally going to change the text of this this text box, or this, what is it called? It's not a text box. What is it? It's just called text. Yeah, a simple text widget, I guess. And it's going to set that text. So what we first need to do is we need to make a variable to our player, because that's where our money is being stored. It's inside of our player. So we need to get our player reference. And with this player reference variable, we need to change it to be our player camera pawn, because that is our player. And that's a little annoying. I don't know why it does that sometimes. When I typed in player camera, for some reason, sometimes it chops off those references. If you saw that, it's a little weird. I don't know why it's been doing that lately. And now with the reference to our player, we can get out his money, I think we called it. And now, if we wanted to, we can now... There could be two styles of doing this. If we wanted to, we could have had two text blocks for this money. The first text box could have just been money colon, and we could have a second text box just be our dollar amount. To me, it doesn't really make a difference. I'm just going to copy paste this right here, and we're going to do an append, and we're going to make the start of it always be money, and then the bottom of it, we will just have it be that dollar sign. That looks fine to me. All you need to do with strings is when you put them in a text, you just drag, drop it, and it'll convert it automatically. That is nice. And then the second one that we need to do the binding for is our lives. So once again, let's do binding, and we can create a new binding. We get a new function. Let's rename the function to be our lives binding. And with this lives binding, we need to get our, what is it called? It's our game mode is what we need. So what we could do is we could get our game mode here, and then we could cast our game mode. We could cast a game mode. What is it? Tower defense game mode, and we could get out our lives. But the issue is that this is going to be running. I think bindings run on tick. I believe bindings run on tick. So I don't really want to be casting every single tick. I'm not really a fan of that. So what we're actually going to do is we are going to copy paste this, and we are going to go inside of our event graph, and on events. Pre-construct, called both by game, runs to the initial setup for the widget to better preview. I'm not going to use this. I'm not really used to using event pre-construct. Let's just do it on event construct. Event construct is the same as event begin play, and I'm just going to promote our game mode to variable, and we're going to just call this game mode. That works for me. Or maybe we should rename that because game mode's a little vague. It could be distracting. Let's call it TD game mode. That works. And we're promoting that to a variable. So on construct, we're going to be getting our game mode, casting it, and then saving that reference as a variable. So now inside of our lives binding, let's just get our lives from our game mode, and we can now do the same thing we did before. We can append, we can hook up our append to our end. I'm going to copy paste just the very beginning of this. Lives colon space is what we have there, and then we just punch in our integer on the bottom, and then that will hook that up. So now, hopefully, at the start of the game, what we need to do is we need to add this to our viewport. So where's our begin play? Here's our event begin play. You can see we already have some code there. I'm fine with that. On the very end of it, let's create our widget that we just made. Once again, this is inside of our player pawn. So at the start of our player, we will create the widget and add it to a screen. This will be our overlay widget. Do we want to promote this to a variable? I think we will. And we're going to make this our overlay reference. We'll do that. We might never need to use this reference, but we have it in case we need it, is what I would say. It's just good to maybe hold on to that. And then we just need to add this to our viewport, and we are good. Before we made a widget reference, that widget reference I believe is for our building widget, so I'm actually going to rename that real quick. And let's call this our builder widget reference. This is a previous variable that we had made a while ago here. When you rename variables, it should update any reference to that variable, so it's not like we need to go anywhere and remake things because we changed the name. We're good. I just want to rename that just so we have a clear difference in our variable names. So now, at the beginning of our player, we're creating the widget, we're storing its reference, and we're adding it to the viewport. Let's make our money have a default value. Let's set it to be like 10. Let's make it something other than 10 because we made that the default's in there. Let's make our money default to 100. I like that. And then let's go inside of the lives of our tower defense game mode. And I believe last time I set it to be 1. Let's set it to be, let's say like 20. Let's do that. So now at the start of the game, if you remember in our overlay we made it 10 and 10. That's not going to be the actual values. These should automatically update when we add this to our screen. So on play, it adds to our screen. 0 money, 20 lives. So our lives are hooked up, but our money is not. So we have an issue, and that is that we never gave a reference to who our player is. We created the player reference, but we never actually fed our widget that reference. So inside of our player camera pawn, where we create the widget, we just need to say, hey, set player reference, because that's what we called that variable, and we need to feed it a reference to self, because we are inside of our player. And now, if we hit play, everything should be good, and now we have money 100, lives 20. I like it. So we can keep track of that now. And once again, that will automatically update. As we start working, as we start spending money and doing stuff, those values will update. So that sets up the overlay to be able to see these numbers. So let's actually make it so that when we kill enemies, they give us money. So what I want to do is I want to minimize this, Let's go inside of our AI, and inside of our runner structure, let's set up how much money they give us. So let's make a new variable. We will make this an integer, and we will call this, what is it called? A bounty, I think we should call it. So I'm just going to move these numbers above the skeletal mesh. So now if we go inside of our runner table, we should have a new value called bounty. Let's make wave 1 give us 10 bounty per kill. Let's make wave 2, because there's only 2 of them, let's make them give like 50 per. And let's make wave 3, let's make them like 30. So now, when we kill an enemy in wave 1, it should give us 10. If we have 10 total enemies, when we kill all 10 of them, it should give us 100. Wave 2, we have 2 enemies, but each give us 50. That'll also be 100. Then wave 5, 5 people, 30. So that would give us a total of 150. So let's go inside of where we are spawning our enemies. So let's go inside of there. And if we go into our spawner, where is that? There it is. What we need to do is we need to feed that value now to our runners. So before we can feed that value to our runners, we need to make a new variable inside of our runners, and we will go inside of them, and we will call this bounty. And we will store that as an integer. And inside of our spawner, with that, let's do set bounty. And now we just need to make another space for this. So this is where things start to get messy. Personally, I don't really mind how messy this is by now. Maybe you've noticed by now how messy this starts to get with all these pins. If you wanted to, you could really try and clean this up. For me, I really don't care. Maybe if I was working with someone else on this, like if this was like a team project, maybe I would try and clean this up a little bit. But to me, I can still read through this just fine. I can highlight it. I can say, okay, our live runners, where is this coming from? If I really needed to follow the pin, I could highlight it and I can see that's going back to there. With my bounty, I can highlight that integer and then I can follow it and I can say, hey, that goes all the way back and it's very clear that goes back to bounty. If you wanted to, you can start rearranging these nodes. Like, say, like this green pin right here, I don't like how wacky it is. I could double click it. It creates a breakpoint, and if I wanted to, like, I could, like, space it out or something like that. Personally, I don't really mind. Also, if we wanted to, we could put this inside of a function if we really wanted to try and clean it up that way. But to me, it's just, this is just going to be blueprints. This is the result of blueprints, in my opinion. Something we could have done also that I started to do in a previous video is that I actually made a variable for this runner structure and I put it temporarily inside of the runner, and I was like, no, I don't like that, let's take it out. You could, if you wanted to, you could go back and you could make that runner structure, and instead of remaking all these variables and then setting them here, you could potentially just feed that runner structure over to our runner. That could be a clean way of doing it. But something I don't really like about that is that inside of all of our runners, we're storing all of these extra variables. So if we spawn potentially 20 runners in our wave, we're going to be creating 20 runner structures and storing that runner structure 20 times over again. I'm not really a big fan of that. But once again, there are workarounds to this. Maybe a creative way of doing this is that inside of our spawner, we could store what is the bounty of the current wave, and instead of storing the bounty in each of our individual runners, we could store it once inside of our spawner, and that instead of grabbing what the bounty is from our runner, we could grab it from our spawner. But potentially, if you wanted to create some logic like having multiple different types of enemies in one wave, then that method obviously isn't going to work, and storing your bounty inside your runner is the way to go. So this is just coding, though. This is just natural. There's always multiple ways of doing things. Some can be cleaner, some can be more performant, some can allow you for additional functionality later, some of them hamper additional functionality later. There's just a lot of ways of doing things, and as you start working, you will probably find certain methods you like using, certain styles you like using, And a lot of times it really depends on what type of game you're working on, depends on really what you're going to be doing. So what we did is, if I backtrack, we set up the variable inside of our runner, we set it up inside of our data table, now we're feeding it to our runner. So what we want to do is, on the death of our runner, let's send money to our player. So inside of our runner, on damage, on our death, we need to feed money back to our player. So how can we get a reference to our player? Well, there's a few ways. If we go to our projectile, we could do it there, but I don't know if I really like that. Let's think for a second. How can we tell? Well, if we look at this from the standpoint that there is only ever going to be a single player in our game, there is 1,000 ways that we could set up this reference to our player, because we need to get a reference to our player to send our player money. Inside of our spawner, we never really stored our player. We could do it here. That could be a way of doing it. There's really so many ways of doing this. To me, if this is a single player game, I know I'm not worried about having multiple players in our game. I'm not really worried about potential replication issues. So really, it's what is the most performant way of storing our player? Well, if I just want to get a simple reference to our player, what I can do inside of our spawner is we could do get player pawn, and this will get a reference to our player's pawn, but it's a vague pawn object reference. So we need to cast this to our player camera pawn, and with this, we can now promote this to a variable, and we can call this our player reference. And now what we have is, in our spawner, we have a stored reference to our player at the beginning of the game. And then what we can do there is that inside of our runner, on his death, we can just take this reference to our spawner, get our player reference, and then with that, we can get our player's money, and that we can add to his money. Actually, should we do that here? Yeah, I guess I'm fine with adding to the player's money here. Potentially, we could create a custom event or a function inside of our player to increase the money. Actually, I kind of like that, because we can reuse that code then. So let's actually do that. We can reuse this code because I can think of another reason why we'd want to add money to our player. So let's create a custom event. We will call it increase money. Zoomed out. Increase money. And with this, what we're going to do is we are going to create an input that is an integer, and we'll call this increase by. And we will take our current money, we will add to it the increase amount, and then we will set our money to be that result. I like it, and that now we can go back inside of our runner. Now with this player reference, we can call that event that we called, I think we called it increase money, and let's do that. I would almost always recommend doing this code before we destroy the actor, because I'm not sure actually what happens if we destroy the actor before we call the event. I'm not sure if the event will actually get called. So if you're ever destroying actor of self, I would try and make sure you run your code before you destroy the actor, because I'm not sure if your code will actually run if it's after that destroy. Just a little side note. And now let's grab the bounty that we set inside of that actor, and now we will increase the money. So let's try this out. So our first wave should give $10 per kill. When we spawn our enemy, we are telling it what its bounty is from our table, and that when that runner dies, we are saying, hey, to our player, take our money. So let's try it out. So let's create some towers. Let's create a bush tower, and then let's create a second bush tower, and now let's spawn. And now our money is 110, our money is 120, our money is 130. I like it. Perfect. So we are now increasing our money as we kill. Let's make one more way that we increase our money. How about at the end of waves, our player gets money? So let's actually go inside of, let's see, how should we do this? Once again, there's several ways of doing it. So I know, where do we calculate where our wave is officially over? It's right here. This is our code where we're constantly checking when the wave ends and when we increase the wave. So I know right before I do this wave increase, I want to get the bounty of the current wave and add money to our player. There's a lot of ways that we could do this. We could make a variable here, and we could call this bounty. We could make this an array, and that we could just like store the bounties of each individual wave. That is a perfectly valid way of doing it. Why not just store it inside the runner structure? Because our runner structure technically is wave by wave. Why don't we just make another variable inside of here and store it there? I kind of like that personally, and we'll call this wave bounty, or finish wave bounty. Let's do that. Finish wave bounty, and let's put that above our skeletal mesh. Now inside of our runner table, this will be the amount that we give the player when they finish killing all of the enemies. So let's make wave 1 give us like an additional 25. Let's make wave 3, or wave 2 give us an additional 30, and we'll make wave 3 give us an additional 35. So let's try that out. And inside of our spawner now, when we finish the wave, or is this our spawner? Yes, this is our spawner. On tick, we're checking if we've killed the wave. If we have killed the wave, let's get out the bounty. So we ran this only when we're starting the new wave, so this will hold the current wave's information. So what we can do is we can get out the current wave's information when we finish the wave, and that now we can increase the player's bounty. So with that player reference, here's an additional reason that we would store the player reference here, is that now we need that player reference to increase his money. So you can see how even though there was multiple ways for us to do the player reference before for AI runner, this way kind of makes sense to me now. Now that I think about it, I didn't really even pre-plan this, that we now have our player reference here anyways. So now we can do the increase money, that custom event we just created, we can reuse it. And what are we going to increase our money by? We're going to increase our money by the finish wave bounty. And wave 1, we said it was 25. So let's see what happens at the end of our wave. Do we get $25? Let's try it out. So let's create a bunch of towers. And let's create our chair. And now let's see. So we get 110, 120. So at the end of this wave, when we kill all of our runners, our money should be 200, but then it should add, did we say 25 on top of it? So 200, 225. Perfect. So now we have our end of wave bounty. So what do we do with this money? Well, we're going to use this money to buy towers. So let's set up with our wave builder widget, which was or our tower building widget, which is our tower selection widget. Let's attach some money to these towers. So what I'm going to do is, what we can do is inside of our towers, let's actually say inside of our tower data table, let's say how much our towers cost. So let's make a new variable. Once again, this is our tower struct. Let's store a variable and we'll call this cost, and we will make this an integer, and I will move that once again above the static mesh. So now inside of our tower data table, we can say how much our towers cost. Let's make our bushes cost $40, and let's make our chairs cost, let's say, 100. Let's make the chairs super expensive. So let's save, and now what we can do is inside of our widget now, our tower selection widget where we're choosing these towers, let's make some additional functionality here. So what's a good way of doing this? Let's say, let's see, let's make a text widget, I guess. And should we do it inside the button? Let's actually do it inside the button. I don't want to get too much into UI design because it's so personalized to your game. It really is. You can do some cool things with UI. I don't want to really get into that. So we're actually just going to say how much our towers cost inside of these texts. We're going to do something like bush tower, colon, and then we'll just say like $50, and we'll update these values at the runtime. So what we're going to do is let's just remove that. We don't really care. And let's call this text box. Let's call this our bush text. And we will make it a variable, and then we'll do our chair text, and I like it. So one thing that I personally don't want to do, I don't want to create bindings here, because I know we just need to set this at one time. When we first open our widget, we just need to say how much our towers cost. I don't want, because bindings, I believe they run on tick. I believe our game's going to constantly be checking our variables and being like, hey, should we update the text of our text box, whatever it is. I don't want to be checking it that much. That's not really performant to me. With like our lives inside of the other widget, I'm okay with checking constantly because our money is constantly changing. Our lives are constantly changing. Inside of our tower widget, unless your game potentially did have the cost of your towers changed, I'm personally not going to set that up because I don't think the cost of my towers will ever change. I'm not really concerned with that. So what I want to do is at events construct of our widget, so when this widget is created, I want to take my bush tower and I want to create my chair tower, and I want to update their cost. So let's get our data table. So we can do get data table row. We can change it to be our tower data table. Bush works for me. That's the first one we have up. Let's break it and let's set the text of our bush off of row found. Let's take the cost, and now let's do what we've done before. Let's use an append, and we will call this bush tower colon money perfect. And that, let's punch that in. Let's separate it a little bit. Let's give ourselves some space. And that on this bottom side, we just now need to punch in our cost, and now it will update to be bush tower is money of that amount. And that we can pretty much just copy paste this code. Let's copy paste everything except that variable. And now here we will change that to be chair, and we just need to hook our chair text up to its end. Let's move our bush over. So at the start, we'll grab the bush tower from our data table. We'll update its cost. And here we need to do our chair tower with its text. Make that chair tower money from our chair, and we're updating our chair text. That looks good to me. So let's open up this widget real quick and we'll see if that worked. So on play, if I hit Q, you can see our bush tower says $40, our chair tower says $100. That looks good. So let's now make the functionality of pressing these buttons. So when we press our bush tower, or our bush button, should we store those in variables? So what we want to do right here is we want to check to see if our player has that much money. So really what we want to do is when our player clicks that bush tower button, we want to see, does our player, what is his money? And is his money greater than or equal to the cost of the bush tower? Well, we could potentially rerun this code right here of getting the data table row, and I think that would be perfectly fine because I think this is actually pretty performant. Let's see, maybe we should do that because that is actually let's do that because then we could actually reuse the code. I kind of like that. So actually let's do that. I'm actually thinking that through. I was thinking we weren't going to do that, but we could actually reuse our code there. So let's do that. What we're going to do is we're going to get, actually we have it set up right here actually. Why not? So what we're going to do is when we press our button, we're going to set this variable to be whichever tower we just pressed. Then we're going to get out the data table row of that tower, and then let's use that information that we already have set up. So what we're going to do is when we find our row, we're going to break this amount. Let's just break it again for the sake of it being over here and a little bit closer to us. What we're going to check is we're going to check, is that tower we just clicked, is its cost, it's over top of each other. I don't like that. Let's do that. Let's move this underneath. Sure, it's not the cleanest. So what we're doing is when we click either of our buttons, we're setting our variable equal to that row name, and then we're getting out the row of the name that we just set, so we can do this with our bush or our chair. With that, we're going to get the cost, and we're going to see, does our player have money that is equal to or greater than the cost of the tower? And if we do, then we're going to allow our player to build. But not only do I want to let our player build, I also want to subtract our money, but we're going to set that up in a second. So what let's do is let's go here, let's hit play, and let's see if this works. Actually, we need to up the cost of our chair. So our money is 100, our chair is also 100. Let's actually go back into our tower data table. Let's make the chair cost 120 so we don't have enough money to build this tower at the start of the game. So if I hit Q and I hit chair tower, nothing happens. The game stops me because I don't have enough money. However, I can still build my bush tower because I have enough money to do so. So what I will actually want to do is let's see if we can add some additional functionality. I don't want to subtract the player's money when I first click this button, because what happens if I decide I don't want to build this bush tower? Let's actually add a little bit of functionality. I see we're hitting 28 minutes in the video. I'm going to speed this up a little bit, and let's check to see when the player actually decides to build this tower, we will subtract his money, and we'll actually make a little bit of functionality to where with this, let's make it so that if the player right clicks, it stops building and we like clear out this building reference. So let's do that very quickly. So inside of our ghost tower, I'm going to hit escape on all of this because I have a lot pulled up. Let's open up our ghost build tower. So when we actually build our ghost tower, I want to subtract the player's money. So what we can do here is we're actually just going to get a reference to our player when we build. Once again, there's many different ways we could do this. For me, I'm fine with getting the player pawn. To me, this is a single player game, so I'm fine with getting the player pawn. I'm fine with casting this to our AI runner. I'm fine with hooking this up, and that I'm just going to, let's make a, actually, we're going to reuse our increase, why am I doing AI runner? That's wrong. This is our player. We need to cast to our player camera. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to reuse that increase money event, but we're actually going to increase our money by a negative amount. Let's do that. And what I actually want to do is grab our tower data, let's break the cost of our tower, but let's actually multiply this by a negative integer of -1, so that our cost, instead of like our bush I think was 40, instead of it being 40, it's -40, and when we feed -40 into here, we're going to be adding to our money a negative amount, so that will lower our money. So that works for me. One more thing I want to do is let's set up quickly the right click of canceling a tower. So in our project settings, I need to create a new player input. So under inputs, under action mappings, let's make a new action, and let's call this right click, and we will make this our right mouse, where is it? Right mouse button. I like it. Let's go inside of our player, and now, like we did with our left mouse button, where is that out? Right here. Let's do right click, and with that, we're pretty much going to copy paste this almost. With our builder reference, if it is valid, so if we are currently building a tower, we want to call inside of this new tower, we need to call a new custom event. Instead of it being place tower, let's do cancel building. And what we are just going to do is we are going to destroy self. I think that's all we need to do. I honestly don't think there's more we need to do there. We haven't subtracted our player's money, so it's not like we need to add it back in yet. When we destroy this actor, that should automatically clear out this reference here. So I think that's good for me. I think simply destroying that actor will solve any problems we have. So let's try that out. So on right click, we need to cancel building. Cancel, we need to grab our reference and do cancel building, and is valid. Let's try this out. So when we actually build our tower, we're going to decrease our player's money by the cost of the tower, and if we right click, we will cancel building. So let's try that out. So we can't build our chair because we don't have the money, but with our bush, if we left click, we have our tower. If I right click, it stops building and nothing I can do brings that back. However, if I press Q again and I go to build it again, we can, and if I left click, our money goes down to 60. Now our money goes down to 20, and if I try to build a third, it will not let us. And actually now I see we have the issue of our widget stays on our screen, but oh, we made the functionality before to where if we press our button again, it removes our widget. I like it. So let's play a wave or two, and let's get our money back up. And let's see if we can build another bush tower. So my money is now back up. I can hit bush tower, and we can build again, and you can see it subtracts our money. So as we play, we can build more and more towers. At the end, we got the additional money jump for finishing the wave. So I think that looks pretty good to me. We can select our towers. We can cancel them at any time. It's not until we actually build the tower that it subtracts our money. I like it. So that is it for this video. In the next video, let's see. I haven't really decided, I guess, what we're going to do in the next video. I think it will be a wait and see game. So I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video, and we will set up some more functionality.